we're going to discuss psilocybin retreats. What's happening behind the closed doors and what are the benefits for people? My guest today for the Harvest Series podcast is Dr. Dingle Spence. Hello, Dingle.
Hi, Rose. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here and explaining what's happening during psilocybin retreats because you're organizing one with Harvest. I've never been to a psilocybin retreats, and I'm really curious to know what is it exactly. First, can you tell me more? Because I know there's hundred of ways to use mushroom or psilocybins. Can you give me first your scientific background, because that's something that's quite structured in Jamaica?
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, my name's Dingle Spence. I'm Jamaican. I always have to say, despite the British accent, but I'm born, raised, lived, and worked in Jamaica all my life. By professionally, I'm an oncology and palliative care doctor, and I ran a hospital for 20 years for the government of Jamaica. But I've also been a type of physician that's always been interested in alternative and different routes and types of practices. So I spent time in China some years ago studying acupuncture. I've done Reiki, vortex healing, homeopathy, herbal medicine. I'm a lifelong meditator. And I think most importantly, I studied shamanic energy medicine in Chile some years ago. And I'm also now a trained psychedelic facilitator. So working in this space, I feel brings all the skills I've gained over the years into one magical place. So really happy to share more about that.
Wow, you've got a background in palliative medicine. Can you tell me more? What led you to this specialty?
Well, my father was an oncologist, and so I followed him around as a child. And, you know, there was a part of me, I was always more interested in the people that we couldn't cure. So I was more interested in what happens to the folks that aren't going to survive their illness. You know, they might have 6 months, they might have 3 months, they might have a couple of weeks. How do we support those people? And so it's a type of journey in itself, of course, life and coming towards end of life. And there's a particular skill set that we need in palliative care because we know we can't fix you. So we need to be able to be present and journey with you. And I think the thing for me that drew me to palliative care is that you're talking about a whole person. You know, we move away from, oh, you've got a tumor in your lung, let's fix that, which is kind of how oncology tends to show up. Whereas palliative care says there's this person who also happens to have lung cancer that is probably going to take their life at some point. But how do we look after that whole person? How do we support them and their family? Because when the ill person is suffering, everybody suffers. So palliative care is really about the relief of suffering and whatever that looks like, physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, etc.
Wow. And can you describe me the moment when you realized that psilocybin could have a transformative potential for healing, especially in this context?
So interestingly, I am not working with psilocybin at end of life. I was introduced to this work through working with grief. So I was contacted about 4 or 5 years ago by a group in the US, the west coast of the US, who had an understanding that working with these medicines in people suffering extreme grief, so parents who had lost a child, in fact, that this medicine could help them on their journey. I mean, obviously, nothing solves deep grief, but we've now learned that working with people who have probably indescribable grief, as you can imagine, parents have lost a child. I find that hard to think of anything worse, actually, in life. But we have now had 4 cohorts of parents come to Jamaica. So, of course, working in a legal, contained setting. And many of them would say that it has transformed their relationship with their grief. And they've gone on to become, people who work in this space as well in their own world, not necessarily with medicine, but understanding how to support others in deep grief. And then I got introduced to Beckley and continue to do, work with Beckley in the psilocybin space.
And we had on this podcast Amanda Fielding, who founded the Beckley Foundation. Yeah, she came to Kaplankaya. Talking about Beckley Foundation, what are the science and the data you mentioned? Deep grief. What is the science behind healing deep grief thanks to psilocybin?
Well, that's a very good question because I'm not sure we fully understand the science, actually. We are coming more from an experiential and I say mystical and spiritual side. There is science out there, but we have not reached the point where we're actually measuring what happens. We feel it's a right place for research, but right now it's an experiential retreat. We have a fair bit of experience ourselves in holding people through this experience, but I honestly could not tell you this is not an exact science. It's not an exact science. And I don't think that working with psilocybin in any form is an exact science. And I think that's one of the beauties of it because I'm trained in a medical model. And whilst I do think there's a place for psilocybin in a medical model, I think it's quite limited actually, because to me, the beauty of this work transcends a biomedical reductionist approach. We're not trying to fix something, which is the way biomedicine works. We are trying to support you to open to a transformational place where you see. So what we say is that psilocybin or these medicines reveal yourself to yourself. And so there's a whole lot of psycho, spiritual, emotional work happening. And even, as we could say, the mystical. And I really don't believe that you can separate that aspect of the healing or the process and say, oh, well, you could just take this like a pill and you'll get better, which is the biomedical approach. And we're saying, no, this is an open, amazing space for transformation on all levels, emotional, spiritual, psychological, sometimes even physical, because there's increasing evidence on the science side that maybe, we can treat pain, maybe we can treat headaches, maybe we can treat chronic illnesses. And if you step into the place that says, the body holds a lot of our trauma, then it's not that surprising that if we can release some of that trauma from the body, we may also be helping on a physical side as well.
Did you notice some people who had chronic disease were cured also after psilocybin during a retreat?
I don't think I could say that, and we haven't, because we don't follow people in that way. I've certainly seen people who came in with certain pains, aches and pains that by the end of the week seem to have disappeared. We don't follow people for years and years, so I can't say to you, oh yes, that was the end of that pain, but we certainly see the relief happening during the week. So I think we have to be careful that we don't think about this in terms of, well, you came and you did a psilocybin retreat and now you're cured or you're fixed. It's not like that at all. This work helps you explore yourself, and it really helps transform. A lot of people say they've had a transformative experience. In fact, I would say a majority of people who come on these retreats would say that. But we do have to get away from this, we're going to come, we're going to do a retreat, and then everything's going to be fine ever after. In fact, it's just the beginning of deep self-reflection, I think.
That's very interesting because I called someone who did the retreat with you, and she told me just you have to manage your expectations, and that's what you are doing, because you still need to do the work. And as you say, this is just the beginning of the journey.
That's right. And I think, you say the word work, and I think that's so important that, yeah, you probably have fun and it's nice and Jamaica's beautiful and all of that, but this is serious work. So, if you want to come and play and have a really great time, it's probably not the space for you. So this is internal work. And so when we're in ceremony and we do treat it as a ceremony, as a sacred space when we're actually ingesting the medicine, and we say medicine with a capital M, um, in that way. So, we understand that this is a sacred and wise medicine and that indigenous peoples have been using, as you know, for millennia. And so when you come and we do lots of preparation with you, we talk about three legs of the stool. So the prep happens before you get here online. Then you come. So that's the first leg. The second leg is a week here in Jamaica, which includes two ceremonies. And then the third leg of the stool is what we call integration. And so many of us would say there's no point really in doing a journey if you're not gonna use what showed up for you and see how you can integrate that into your life, because then why else are you doing this if not to transform your life, to show up differently in your relationships, in your workplace, and so on. And that's continued work. So anybody who kind of thinks, oh, I'll just do that, I'll be a magic wand, I'll be transformed, that would be definitely an unrealistic expectation.
Okay, very interesting, Dingle, because Harvest or some also other events are organizing some very luxury retreats in very nice hotels where you go to heal and to be curious, but also to have some to enjoy luxury and to make new friends. But this is not the case. You tell to people like they're here to work on themselves and to do like a deep, potentially very deep work.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, there's plenty of retreats that do all sorts of different things and maybe much more recreational and luxury focused. Not that, I mean, it is pretty luxurious and beautiful here. But I think, we are really more about, because people come usually in their transition in life, you late mid 30s, where am I going? I've been working on this for some years and I thought that was my path. I realize it isn't. Or you may unfortunately be facing some sort of grief or loss, or you may be facing divorce, in your mid 50s. So a lot of people come in their transition phases because they're searching, they're looking to see. A lot of people say, I'm looking for clarity. And that's a word we hear a lot. And I think what we try and explain to people, it's not like the mushrooms are going to say, okay, Jane, you need to do this, 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 this. It's not that kind of clarity. The clarity that you start to get is an understanding of how aspects of your personality are blocking you, or aspects of your behavior are blocking you in your relationships or in your work. And so it's more about how do I shift and change myself so that I can show up differently in the world. And so it's more like that. So yeah, that kind of idea that we could just get, a list of answers to our questions. If that's what you're thinking, then it's
Yeah.
probably not going to work out like that.
And do you sometimes make people go back to childhood trauma or to social conditioning, or not always?
We don't do anything in terms of making anything happen. We support people in their process. So one of the most important things is helping people work on their intention. So, what is your intention for the ceremony? What is your intention, to help you seek better understanding about what's going on in your life? And so the intention is really helpful. And one of the things also that we say is that, the mushrooms are wise. And I know this is a hard concept for us in the West to kind of take on. But if we treat the mushrooms as a kind of a wise sage, as a wise being, and, we who work in the space believe that the mushrooms will show you what you need to see. will reveal to you what you need to see. And sometimes people are like, oh my God, no, I really didn't want to see that at all.
Do you, because if I were, like, I'm thinking, like, if I were going there, I would be like, oh, what's happening? If I have, if I'm not feeling good, will there be someone to guide me? So how are you supported on site?
So how would we support you in a ceremony or in the retreat? So there are always trained facilitators like myself. So per retreat, there would be anywhere between 5 and 6 facilitators who all are trained and experienced in this work. We also always have a nurse on site during ceremony. But really what we're talking about is, you know, we do a lot of prep. We do a lot of talking things through before you actually ingest the mushrooms. We do a lot of question and answer sessions. And you've already, as I said, you've had 4 weeks of prep online with an app that guides you through how to think, meditations, journaling, how to come to your intention. So there's a lot of support before you get here. And then our work is to, as I said, is to journey with you, is to hold people and support people through the week. And that may require sitting holding your hand for 5 hours. It may mean many different things. One of the things people always say, oh, so what happens if I have a bad trip? And we really try and help people understand that we don't use that word. We don't go there. We say, yes, people have challenging experiences. Absolutely. And what our work is to help you navigate those and to help you maybe get some understanding about why you had that challenging experience and what it might be showing you, rather than saying, oh my God, I had a bad trip, I don't want to talk about it. No. It's much more, okay, so it's all information. And if we treat it as information, then we can help you navigate maybe the meaning of that information to your current life or situation.
That's very interesting. Would you have an example of someone who's having like a strong reaction, and in the end, with you helping them or supporting them, it led to something very interesting, and it led to some growth?
One of the things that many people come in with is they say, oh, I'm a control freak. You know, one of my biggest fears is losing control. And
That would be my
those
case.
folks
Yeah.
were like, oh, little red flag right there. And often those folks struggle as they feel the medicine coming on. They may go, no, and they'll say, make it stop. Give me something to make it stop. I can't manage it. You know, and so that's a real challenge for us as facilitators. But mostly we're skilled enough to help people navigate. It's a little bit like a plane taking off, you know, that bit where it might be a bit juddery as you're going into the experience. But mostly when you get to cruise level, it's not quite so scary. So one of the things we do is help you navigate, and with different tools, Reiki, hand holding, walking around, various things, to help get people to be able to let go. And we will have talked about letting go before in our prep.
I
And we
guess.
had a woman a few weeks ago who was that person. She was like, oh my God, get me out of here. I can't manage it. But we were able to get her through that. And she is absolutely so grateful because she was able to go to an emotional place that she clearly didn't want to see. But once she allowed herself to go there, to see some maybe past childhood traumas, to see why how come she became a controlling person, because that was the only way that she could cope with her world. And as that kind of tight holding melted away, she was able to come closer to her true self and to see who she really is, and to be able to come from that place rather than the kind of rigid controlling. I mean, it's a work in progress, right? It's not like, oh, I'm not a controlling person. But what happens is you have insight now. You know that between the stimulus and response lies a pause. I think Viktor Frankl said it. So now, instead of just being reactive, which is how many of us are, we can say, okay, I see that coming. Normally that would trigger me to behave like this. Now I can take a breath and go, no, I'm going to respond in a different way. And I think that's one of the beauties is it helps you regroove. This is the science part now, to regroove your neural pathways and not keep going down the same old rutted track that you have an opportunity to see it differently, to see yourself differently and respond in a different way.
So how is it happening during the retreats? You said like you had two ceremonies. Are they usually very, I guess, different for each people, the two ceremonies?
Yeah, they can be. And I think so. We have a day where, arrival, and we do what we call an opening circle where we get to know each other, learn everybody's names, and then just give a bit of an outline of the week and answer questions. And then on our second day, all our days begin with movement and meditation. So whatever we can do to help people calm their nervous system, so important. We also have what we call breath work. We also have a chance for people to talk one-to-one with the facilitators about how they're feeling, how their intention is going, and a little bit about dosing. People may have had a lot of experience and kind of have an idea of their dose, and some people don't, and that's fine. And then later that day, we go into our first ceremony. The ceremony is usually about 5 hours. It starts in the afternoon in daylight. We have a beautiful ceremony space. We have live music, which is part of the medicine, actually, as well. And so people are lying on a mat on the floor, a nice soft mat. We have blankets, pillows. We ask people if they can to either close their eyes or wear an eye mask, because it's not about rainbows and unicorns. It's about an inward journey. And then for that 5 hours, the facilitators are moving around the space. The music is playing. If people want to get up and sit on the grass or hug a tree, we can do that. But in general, the power of the ceremony is in the group. So there's a group field and a community that we're building, and that is a really powerful experience.
Also, it's happening in Jamaica. Can you tell me more about the Jamaicans' vibe? Does it play a role also in the retreat?
Well, we say, as soon as you say the word Jamaica to people, everybody goes, whoo, Jamaica. So right there, that's something nice. So it's set in a very, very beautiful part of Jamaica that most tourists don't ever see, because we're not on the beach. We're in the mountains or the hills, beautifully green, very old property. And I would say maybe 2/3 of the team is Jamaican. So experienced musicians, facilitators, breathwork facilitators. So we have been doing this now for, I think, at least three full years. And so there's a lot of experience now that we bring. We usually have a couple of facilitators who join us from overseas. Right now we have somebody who's from Costa Rica, who's a beautiful musician. We have another gentleman who is from Mexico originally, and he's trained with the curanderos in Mexico. So he has training right at, from the indigenous people themselves. So I think we pride ourselves on a really diverse team of facilitators, and the feedback that we get from our guests is, oh my God, you guys are amazing. How do you do this work? So I guess we probably are doing something special. Yeah.
I'm sure that's what I've been told. Can you tell me about one particularly profound experience you've seen at one of the retreats, where someone really had a deep transformation or illumination on site?
Yeah. So I can think of somebody we had, in the last couple of months who just always felt trapped in their body, felt unhappy, felt burdened, had a very difficult childhood, grew up in an abusive household, and never really felt that they could be themselves. And by the end of the second ceremony, the first ceremony, the person was, apparently in torment, so we talk about a challenging experience, but it's almost like you have to you don't have to, but it seems to be helpful if the medicine can help you see some of the suffering that you've had or presence it to you in a way. And sometimes that's hard. And then, we have a day off, a day in between where we do integration and different practices. And then he went back into the second ceremony. And by the end of the second ceremony, and he needed to be literally to be held. We had to hold him. This is a gentleman in his early 60s, so you can imagine many years of pain and suffering. And then towards the end of the ceremony, he just got up and he said, I'm free. I'm free. And he entered back into the space coming out from the garden. And he just started dancing and moving his body in a way that you could really, I started crying. I'm nearly going to cry now. You could see he was just liberated from that cage of pain and suffering. You know, it doesn't mean it's magically all gone, but it's the beginning of a liberation that was genuinely felt in his spirit, in his body. And one of the things we often say to people is take a selfie on day one and then take a selfie at the end of the week. And people's faces are transformed. People, it's hard,
Wow.
it's kind of hard to believe, but people look so different when they're leaving than when they came in. So, you know, even the ones who are like, make it stop, I can't stand it, oh my God, almost always there's some transformation that also happens. And just last week we had somebody like that. She was like, no, I can't do this. And yet, when we hugged her goodbye on the last morning, she looked totally different. And she said, I feel totally different, having gone through some really tough moments. So,
How do you help people to, when they go back to their life and whatever problems they have or how bored they could be with their job and their life, how do you help them to keep practice the new connections they had during the retreat? So it really has an impact for the rest of their life.
yeah, that's a great question, Rose. That is the crux and the kernel of the matter. So I think many things happen. One is that people who come on a retreat together form a community. And that is a very powerful community. And some of our retreats, we see that we have a WhatsApp chat and we see them continuing to support each other months, if not a couple of years later. So we see that. We do have an integration program that lasts for 6 weeks after the retreat. And that's a place where we really are offering the support. You know, how are you, because you do have to, it's again, it's work, you know, none of this is kind of magically happening. How do you change some of your habits? How do you make sure that you're looking after yourself when maybe you weren't? What does that look like for you? Does it mean that it's 10 minutes of meditation in the morning and, you know, a walk 3 times a week, whatever it is? So there's the things that happen on the physical. You know, one of the very important things is we help people understand how they talk to themselves. You know, how do you talk to yourself? Do you have a really critical voice that's like, nah, 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 nah? Is it your mom's voice, your dad's voice, your own voice? Who is it who's telling you you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you whatever? And so we help people to identify those voices and to shift their relationship to themselves and to that voice. And as we shift our relationship to ourselves, we can really start to shift our relationship outside of ourselves to others in the workplace, in our families, and so on. Yeah,
Dr. Dingle, in this
it is very
series, we're
powerful.
yeah, I noticed that in this series we're focusing and I think transformative and brave also. And in this series we're focusing on the theme of courage because it's going to be the main theme of the event in Kaplankaya in May. And I wanted to ask you what does courage mean to you, Dr. Spence, and how do you see courage manifesting in the work that you do with psilocybin?
That is such a great question. I think it, first of all, you have to be courageous to, you know, get on a plane, leave your family, leave your life, make a choice that you're going to step into the unknown. So, you know, the journey begins the minute you sign up. It doesn't just start when you get to Jamaica. And I think it does. It is a courageous thing to do personal introspection and personal work because society and life, you know, we're not raised like that. We're raised to just be on the treadmill, do more, get better, earn more money, get married, have kids, do all the right things. And it takes courage to say, no, yes, I'm doing those things, but that's not enough. I need to understand myself a bit more. I need to show up to others in a different way. And I think that underlying everything we do here is the courage of the individual to be willing to look at themselves and to, you know, take the bad with the good and help. How do we help support you in looking at all of those things and not just think, oh, we're terrible people and all we got to do is get rid of the bad side and we'll be fine. It's finding a balance. And I think really finding who we truly are. You know, that thing about the sky is always there, blue, and the clouds of life and everything get in the way. And so what we're helping you do is to see behind the clouds, because the sky is always there. It's not like you have to invent the sky. It's like, what can you do to clear the way, clear the vision to actually be in touch with the sky all the time, as it were. I know it's a bit of a weird metaphor, but
No, no.
so that's what this work does. It brings you. We're really trying to bring us back to our shining essence. I mean, we were born, I think, divine, and then life happens, and we get hurt and traumatized and all of that. And so it's helping us just really see and help unpick some of that, so that we are not driven by old reactive behaviors that we developed that might have been useful at one point, but no longer are and don't serve us anymore. So how do we move out of that into a more truer representation of who we are and, you know, shine our light?
Can you share a moment in your life where you had to show courage, either personally or professionally?
Wow.
Sorry, I didn't warn you
Well,
before.
professionally, I don't want to say every day, but I mean, when you are walking to the bedside of somebody who is terminally ill, and who doesn't want to face that, or whose family doesn't want to face that, and yet you know that the best way to support them is to help them understand what's going on. For me, it took quite a lot of courage for me to be able to have those conversations, because it's very easy not to have those conversations, which is basically what happens in medicine, is that most of those conversations are not happening. And so palliative care is one of the specialties that goes, okay, deep breath. We need to have this conversation with this patient, with this family, because we know that if we don't have the conversation, things are going to be much harder for them. And so to me, that has always taken courage, personal courage for me to be able to step into that space, because the human tendency is to go, oh, we'll just forget about that and not say what we need to say. I mean, obviously, you're not going into a room and going, did you know that you're dying, Mrs. Smith? No, that's not the conversation we're having. We're having a conversation that helps feel out what Mrs. Smith understands, what she wants to know, how we can support her in her journey. So in palliative care, communication is like therapeutic. And so all my career, I've had to show up with courage. Yeah.
How do you help people not to be scared by death? And did it influence your way of looking at death?
Well, now we come into, you know, what spiritual belief systems one works from. And so I could be saying very controversial things here. I mean, for me, death is transition. And I've personally had experience of out of body. So I know that I am not my body, that there's some other part of me that continues outside of my body. And I think, you know, there's enough literature, if you want to look that up, there's enough literature of near-death experiences and people going beyond and coming back. So if you can embody that, take that on, then somehow death may seem a little more easy to face. I think the hard thing for most of us is not so much that we're going to die, but who we're leaving behind, you know, that we're leaving a life, we're leaving our nearest and dearest. And that's what I see showing up more for people than that actual fear of their life ending. It's the real sadness of who you're leaving behind. Because I mean, you know, we're all going to have to do this, right? We're all going to have to do it. And so one of the things that we emphasize in palliative care is making it, you know, okay, what's a good death? We could talk all day about that. But, you know, if your mother passes away in a way that feels comfortable, supported at the end of her life, maybe when you come to the end of your life, you will have had an experience that says, oh, it could be like this. So it's helping people just navigate what's, you know, can be a difficult time.
Yeah.
And there's no easy way out, really. But there's kind, loving people out there who can be supportive. Yeah.
This will be my last question, Dingle. How can we encourage others to be brave in their own transformation, especially when it comes to exploring unconventional healing path?
Well, certainly in the mental health arena, there's not a lot of great stuff. I mean, yes, there's talk therapy and all of that. But I think what many people say, and I've found this myself, is that when you feel willing to step into this place of medicine, psilocybin as medicine, so, you know, you can have a transformation or a healing or an understanding that 10 years of talk therapy never got you there. Because there's something that the medicine takes you to places that cognitive therapy is not going to get you there. And that's why I think we have to step away from this medical model idea that, you know, you do this and you'll get fixed. It's, you know, we are whole beings. We have a spiritual, psychosocial, physical dimension, and the medicine works with you on those dimensions. And I would encourage anybody who feels called. And I think one of the things we talk about in this space is feeling called. You know, don't force yourself. If you feel called to explore this area, answer the call, because there's some inner intelligence that is calling you. And whenever we have people in the circle, we honor and recognize that. It's like, you know, what was it that called you here? Let's honor that. And so, yeah, listen to the call and answer it if you're one of those folks.
Just a precision, because we discussed this at the beginning of the podcast when we were talking together, but I'm not sure we mentioned it in the interview. We're not talking about microdosing.
No, we're not at all talking about microdosing. That's another whole conversation. We're talking about a dose that, well, we don't use this whole term about hero's dose. We're not into that either. We're talking about a measured dose that we kind of, you know, we work anywhere between 2 and 5 grams of our particular psilocybin mushroom. And that's generally a dose that will give most people a powerful experience that we can help them navigate and come out with a definite degree of transformation. I mean, I think most people would say on our feedback forms, they say this was a transformative experience. And that's in writing on their feedback form. So it's like, yeah, probably something happens that you could call transformative.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dingle. You're in Jamaica right now doing a retreat. Thanks for taking the time to explain all this to me. I was very curious about this transformative experience, and thanks for everything you're doing for people.
Thank you, Rose. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
I hope to meet you soon for real.
Okay.
Have a great day.